Thank you so much to ThinkyCon for having me today. This has been a really cool opportunity, and I've had so much fun working on this talk that we're about to have. I'm Tori Smith, so welcome to my talk about emotional environmental puzzle design. So a little bit about me. I'm a game designer, narrative designer, game writer, performer, and educator in the NYC area. I wear a lot of hats. I bring to my design practice almost a decade of experience as a performer and writer in the NYC entertainment industry. I do a lot of work designing immersive narrative experiences, like developing LARPs and theater, as well as narrative digital and tabletop games. I'm currently an adjunct professor of game design at the Pratt Institute, City College, and NYU's Game Center, where I also got my MFA from. And I'm also the narrative lead and NPC coordinator of Grimoire Productions' upcoming Regency era LARP Lies and Liabilities. We're working hard over here. Much of that work explores feminine relationships, anxieties of emerging adulthood, and intimate space. Much of this talk will be referencing my experience and research developing No Worries, an Uncozy Escape Room Experience. So what is that? No Worries is a cross between interactive theater and an escape room that I originally developed as my MFA thesis at NYU's Game Center and have since exhibited around immersive theater and game spaces in NYC. It's a multimedia 15-minute solo immersive experience. In No Worries, the player takes on the role of a young woman. She's in her mid-20s named Abigail, who needs to tidy up her apartment and decorate for her own birthday party she's hosting in her living room later that evening. All of her friends are invited and supposedly on their way, but over the course of the 15-minute experience, which is very short for an escape room, which is typically limited to about an hour, all of her friends cancel on her. So by the end of this escape room, the player is sitting in a clean, decorated room with no one to celebrate their birthday with. In short, I really took this opportunity to capitalize on our worst collective social nightmare to explore cozy game aesthetics and mechanics in escape room fashion to find where the line of uncozy is and I found some success in this experiment. So what makes No Worries different from your typical escape room? Typical escape rooms have one goal: escape, solve the puzzles, unlock the door, get the heck out of there. But No Worries asks the player to stay. They're told that the door is unlocked. They can leave whenever they want, but we're asking them to stay for the whole 15-minute experience and experience this story. The player is also explicitly tasked not with solving puzzles, but rather with a different activity through which these puzzles may emerge. The puzzles and earned escaped aren't the point, but their solutions may provide emotional checkpoints. Players may not engage with the design puzzles or their solutions at all, but they're certainly engaging with the objects that make up those puzzle elements in the space through the activity we've tasked them with, and they're getting something out of that. I had one player say something to the effect of, I tidied this room the whole time, and that was so sad. And that was honestly great to hear. We love making the players sad in this game. So what we're capitalizing on here is the title of this talk, Emotional Environmental Puzzle Design. This is evoking emotions in your players through a puzzle, whether it be their elements solving, the process of solving, and the solution itself via their presentation and interaction in the environment. So how do we create environmental puzzle design? First, what kind of puzzles are you creating? Truly, whatever you want, get creative. Make your mazes, your ciphers, your anagrams, your logic grids, what have you, but ground them in the environment with resonance for the emotion of your choice. Are you trying to make your player feel happy, sad, angry, or in No Worries case, profoundly anxious? So for this talk, we're going to keep coming back to these books here in the bottom right-hand corner. These are books from the No Worries experience. When designing these puzzles, ask and answer these three questions. What is the object? Where is it in space? And what do we do with it? Let's start with the first question. What objects would your player character have in their space? Snoop, In the book Snoop, What Your Stuff Says About You by Sam Gosling, the author analyzes what our things project about our inner lives. We possess our possessions for a reason, and we put them in certain places for another reason, right? Another research piece for No Worries was Tracy Eamon's My Bed. This found happening piece depicts the artist's bed and objects that she accumulated while in a depressive state. These objects, from the disheveled bed to the consumed cigarettes and stained underwear on the floor, fill in the pieces of the moments before we as audience members entered the space. In No Worries, the player character has trash, clothing, framed pictures, stuffed animals, little trinkets, all kinds of junk, seemingly junk, scattered all over the room. So let's take a closer look at those books I mentioned. These books had custom book covers made that reference some real life titles that may look familiar to the discerning eye. As for their contents, these books were glued shut, as I didn't want players looking through them and getting distracted from the tidying task at hand. They can read on their own time. 15 minutes is so valuable. The titles on the shelf say a lot about the player character. A fantasy novel, a French textbook, we've got a self-help book, and several more. And just looking at these covers, we can tell that our Abigail character is a bit of a romantic who has at least a mild grip on her own anxieties. Inspecting them further, one might notice the spines. So the spines of these books is where the puzzle starts to happen, right? We've got distinct shapes in a gradient that inform their correct placement. This is then reinforced by some alphabetizing of the author's last names if you really want that dash of crunch. But getting them in the right place will get the player to the next step in this escape room's puzzle flow. So look around you right now. If the room that you're in right now was an escape room, what does the stuff in it, hopefully it's your stuff, convey about you to a complete stranger, the player? What would you use as the pieces of your puzzle? Looking at items in this way to decipher personality can feel sort of like archaeology. Who lived here? What did they do? But your puzzle elements will ideally pull this double duty for grounding the player in time, place, and character while being used to find that puzzly solution. We also need to take into account the player's role as the player character. So, are they in their own space or someone else's? Right? Where are we? Are they playing solo or with the group? In No Worries, even though it was designed as a solo game, it had a two-player option for showcase purposes. It still worked, but it was different. The caveat was that the experience became a less introspective one, and a less introspective one about being in your own space, and became more something to the effect of we two people are friends of this player character. We're observers in this stranger's space. We're helping our friend out, right? There was a degree of separation there. It still worked. It was still fine. And they still felt feelings, but it was different just because of that small change. Additionally, the research we've looked at so far largely explores bedrooms as the primary environment. This is a supremely intimate space where we're at our most vulnerable, right? It's where we sleep, dress, have sex. Bedrooms are crafted for us. So if so much of the research focuses on bedrooms, why did I put No Worries in the living room? Well, a few reasons. First, it's a semi-public space. So when people come over, the living room is where you hang out. It's less of an intrusion for others to enter and interact with. Second, it's a highly used and flexible space. We do a lot of stuff in the living room. We eat, work, study, nap, create, do nothing sometimes, right? We live in the living room. We do a lot in here. I'm in my living room right now. So, and then third, it's filled with the thing we want to show off, right? The objects that we've taken great pains to curate are exhibited in your living spaces like a museum, and they may move from one place to another, maybe in a puzzle, right? So think about where your objects start. we're going to talk about unpacking. I had to do it, right? Unpacking, developed by Witchbeam, is a pretty recent example of emotional environmental puzzle design in the digital space. In it, you play as another young woman character, moving her possessions from home to home over the course of 20 years. These objects change from place to place, but what stays between each location speaks volumes about the player character and what she holds dear. This player character's possessions largely start in boxes that at the beginning of every level, waiting to be unpacked and organized into their place in whatever room they need to live in, right? So in No Worries, which is, we had a very Tracy Emin approach. It's much more chaotic. Our items are strewn all over the room, willy-nilly. We've got stuff under chairs and on the floor. Some stuff even starts in the trash can. It's truly the most fun escape room to reset because your players clean it up and then you go in and you just throw trash everywhere. Highly recommend. Um, the books in this room, though, bringing it back to the books, are no different. So when the room starts, or when the experience starts, we've got at least 3 of these books lined up on the bookshelf where they go, right? So 9 times out of 10, the player will notice this. And then as they start going through this mess and cleaning up this mess, they're looking out for those books to arrange on the shelf as they clean and find that solution. So now that we know where our puzzle pieces start, where are they ending up? In unpacking, we need to get our stuff out of those moving boxes and placed in the room. But what space is available to us? Sometimes we're moving into a home where we live alone, but others we're sharing the space with a roommate or 2 roommates or a romantic partner, right? These unpacking puzzles have correct but flexible solutions. Bathroom things go in the bathroom, kitchen stuff in the kitchen, but where you put them within those spaces and how you arrange them is kind of up to you. And it'll tell you if you're wrong, right? Um, it's up to the player and their personal organizational sensibilities. One example in particular stands out, the infamous diploma incident. So in this level, we're moving in with our boyfriend and he has prepared no space for us. We have to rearrange his stuff to make room for our own. And we're begrudgingly successful in this endeavor until we realize that there is no space on the walls for us to display our diploma. The only options that were available to us were one, above the toilet, which is gross and is actually an incorrect solution. You can't leave it there, you won't advance the level. And the correct solution, and the only other solution, is putting it under the bed, which is even grosser in its correctness. What a gut punch. So, unpacking boyfriend, if I see you in the street, ooh, you're in trouble, right? In No Worries, there's no Boolean to tell the player that they've put something in the wrong place. Everyone tidies in different ways and likes to organize things into different places. So the primary goal of No Worries could never be puzzle solving. It had to be something else. But that said, how could we hint at where objects should go? So for the books, the bookshelf is the most obvious and ideal choice, right? That's where some of them start at the beginning of the experience. It's a piece of furniture that we as humans have used to store books for centuries. And we've even got some signage that you can't see right now because the books are where they belong. But we've got some signage there saying, "I love to read," where the books go, right? We're giving some hints there. When organized correctly, these books correspond, the shapes on the books correspond to these picture frames that are also scattered around the room. And when these picture frames are hung on the wall, just so, we then get a code that unlocks a box and we get some goodies in there that are more emotional gut punches, right? And thus that completes the puzzle flow in this very tight time frame of 15 minutes. By the end of the experience, other objects in the room, right? Because we had more stuff that aren't necessarily for puzzles. end up in various spots depending on who's playing. One example in particular are these birthday decorations. Some end up in the trash, or some are left on the walls as a somber reminder of your friend's abandonments, and some are used to celebrate with your furry friends, as in this slide here. So, bringing it back to that object that you chose earlier in the room that maybe you want to use in a puzzle, where is it right now? And where could it conceivably end up to work with other objects in tandem to reveal a solution? What does each location reveal, and what does it mean to change that location? So divorce the feeling of the satisfaction of puzzle solving from the emotions that you want to enforce. We may be solving a puzzle, but maybe we're anxious, proud, or bitter about putting an object somewhere in order to solve it. Finally, what actions are we doing with our puzzles? How are we getting them from point A to point B, right? So, with a puzzle, we're solving the puzzle, putting clues together to discover a solution. But what larger action or goal is the puzzle solving actually a result of? In typical escape rooms, it's to escape. In unpacking, it's unpack, and in no worries, it's tidy. These verbs are much more applicable to the space at large, and therefore more actionable with the resulting puzzle solving. Like, you can tell your player, "Hey, here's a puzzle, go solve it," and they'll do it. But grounding the action in emotional stakes goes a really long way. So telling the player, "Hey, tidy and decorate this room, because if someone comes in here and sees it like this, they're going to judge you as a bad person," changes a lot of stuff, right? It hits so much harder with the implication of failure or success. So the books that we had, they moved from point A to point B, one place to another in an orderly fashion because of that tidying goal, not because we, hey, go solve a puzzle. So, other than tidying or organizing, what are some other actions to wrap your puzzle solving in? In Venba, it's cooking. We love Venba. Through cooking and deciphering these recipes, you discover the story of this family and learn about their culture. In Assemble with Care by Us Two Games, you're repairing meaningful objects for other people. And and I've also got a picture from the Room puzzle series here and a little to the left, all very enjoyable puzzle games to me. So let's think back to that object that we've been doing this little mini exercise with, that object in your room that you're making into a puzzle. Maybe you're moving it from one place to another. What are you doing with it? Right? Take the space into context and make the action intimate to your player, whether it be tidying, cooking, dressing up. Maybe you're writing a letter or gardening, solving a murder, or trying to get away with it. Lots of options. The possibilities are endless. Now, I'm not saying that this talk applies to all puzzles all the time, right? It probably doesn't make sense to apply this in your crosswords or your wordles, and it's meant to make you think, to get you thinking more specifically about your puzzles that exist in a larger narrative framework. So puzzles can be freed from existing in that vacuum by investigating their parts, like we have done with our 3 questions. So, as a reminder, what is the object? Determine what it means to the player in the role of the player character. Where is the space? Decide what it means for a puzzle to exist in one place versus another, or to move locations. What do we do with it? Permit your players to interact with your puzzles outside of just being puzzles. In No Worries, we move from a place of anxiety at mess to a feeling of satisfaction at loneliness to one of disappointment by emptiness. So, the puzzle object in your own room that we've been tinkering with this whole talk, what was its emotional journey that you came up with? So, I wanted to leave you guys with a by no means comprehensive list of references or further reading on the subject. So take a look through this. As you do, I just want to give a few thank yous. Huge thank you to ThinkyCon for having me, the NYU Game Center and Clara Fernandez Vera for the venues and guidance to create something like No Worries. My partner Bo McGee for listening to this talk 20 times, and any and all the incredible people who helped play test or develop No Worries and the surrounding research. So please feel free to connect with me online. I'm at Worldwide Blonde everywhere if you have any other questions or want to talk about stuff. And that's all, folks. Thanks so much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Wonderful talk.
Thank you so much.
A bunch of questions in the chat.
Oh, good.
So from Zavi in the chat, I thought this was an interesting one, actually. So I guess because, a bunch of the things you were talking about were about working in a room, you're designing an environment within a room. How did you find that having a window to the outside of the room, or what are your thoughts on having a window to the outside of the room and how that affects puzzle solving? It's quite an interesting
Sure. So, so the way that we set up No Worries is we didn't have a true window, right? Because we were in a room inside another room, and due to budget constraints, I couldn't have NPCs walking by. But we did have a window that my from ITP, one of my assistants, Alexandra, set up that was on a timer. So as the day went on, this window was just a set of LED lights. It started in daylight and it transferred to nighttime. So by stressing that advancement of time and going from daylight, which tends to be happy, right, to nighttime, which can be more somber, we were able, through the environment, able to amp up those feelings more. Did that answer the question? You can also put puzzle stuff out there, live your lives.
Awesome. People will have experienced that with me today because I've gone from day to night just through the duration of these talks.
Been in a puzzle this whole time.
Exactly. Alrighty, next question. There's quite a few. So Aurelius has asked, do you have any suggestions on a starting point for those of us interested in pursuing environmental storytelling and puzzles? You had a list of things in your last slide, didn't you? But maybe you have some other suggestions. They've also asked theater or escape rooms or video games. That would be a good place to start.
Oh my gosh. I mean, all of them. But if you had to pick one, so if you were going to pick something to research, I would say start with escape rooms. Go play some escape rooms wherever you are. They've had a huge renaissance lately, and they're doing some really incredible things beyond the simple get out of this room escape. As for developing them yourself, or developing something that uses environmental puzzle design itself, start with your story. What story are you trying to tell? Who is your main character in that? And what, just classic writing stuff. What journey do you want them to take? And how can the puzzles help reinforce that journey? Again, not letting them exist in a vacuum. So in this case, I would say, start with the story, right? Build that rocket ship of the puzzles as you fly it, in a way. Yeah, for this project, the story came first and then the puzzles came a little bit later, once I knew what needed to be in the room and was able to integrate them that way.
Did the story lead you to the medium of how you constructed it? Or
That's a great follow-up question. The idea for this project actually started as a digital game. I wanted to make this a point-and-click digital game, and this was developed at NYU's Game Center, and they suggested playtest this in real life, throw some trash in a room and see what happens. And I did that, and I was like, actually, this is kind of fun. And I haven't really seen something like this in an escape room before. Let's continue down this path. So it went from digital to in person.
Fascinating. Yeah. All right. So was this? I think this one was maybe a suggestion. No, not even a suggestion. It's a silly question, which is about. Between the No Worries games, did you consider having a different game where people would trash the room to set up for the No Worries game?
Yeah, you're so right. I should have another 15-minute experience where you're actually a raccoon and you come in here and you mess up the room.
So then you don't have to do it.
That's my job. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Although it sounded like you enjoyed that part of the process. So.
It's truly was the most fun of putting this up every time, getting to be please leave the room. I need to throw trash everywhere. Was really great.
Yeah, awesome. I think that question was from, or whatever it was, from Waika in the chat. Then with Plush Lola asking, It seems obvious that non-systemic games work a lot better with this, but do you think it's possible to convey interesting emotions like sadness, for example, in more systemic puzzles?
Um, ooh, that is a really good question that I feel like I need to think on longer than we have time for.
Maybe.
I don't see why not. It would take some experiment.
Mhm,
I'm hesitant to say no. I would say go try it.
mhm,
Prototype it, experiment with it, and see if you're able to get those feelings um, uh, in that way.
mhm.
Is the short answer. The long answer is I need to think about it and
Yeah,
get back.
absolutely. And as I'm going to say in a second, we'll be able to ask more questions in Discord afterwards. So if you have
Mhm.
a longer response to that later, you could leave it there. What time is it? We've got time for the one last question, I think, from Luke in the chat. How do you deal with players experiencing different emotions than the ones you intended, especially when dealing with heavy subjects that have a lasting impact on the player?
Yes. So, taking something from LARP, you do, I'm spacing on a debrief after LARPs, right? You let those characters go in a lot of LARPs. So in showcase purpose for when we like show this game around, I talk with the player, being like, okay, how are we doing? Like, show me what you've done in the room. We're able to talk about it a little bit, and so that they can kind of let that go. Additionally, they're also primed for like you're going to be experiencing some uncomfortable emotions in this room, so they know what they're getting into, and then we talk them down afterwards. And then as a fun thing, right, at some of the showcases, we have like a voting system, so you can decide which of your friends that abandon you is the worst. So by like voting on which one you like the least, you kind of like let it go in a funner way. So we don't leave the player feeling bad. We don't let them leave that way.
Right. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the answers and for the talk.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye,
See you all in
everyone.
a minute, folks.